Um, uh, if they are to be informed by a beauty-first ethic and the realities of organic complexity, what do you see as the path forward for theology and science? And in particular, how does an open-minded scientist incorporate the realities of organic complexity into the work that they do?
So I think, as a scientist, that was the second part of the question. I think, it's just important to bring love to what you're doing. Now, what happens is that in a truth first approach is that an institution, sort of becomes, can become a zombie, and it's no longer fulfilling the mission it was created for. Its only mission is to just go on feeding on real life and existing in a quasi existence. And sometimes that's the only job you can get, is in that kind of a zombie organization. And when you start to feel that, you got to be careful, because you got a family to feed, and and maybe you are making a difference, and this and that, and whatever. So as a scientist and engineer, you're in these systems, right? Jane Jacobs talked a lot about that. She says, how can people spend their lives, inventing poisons or viruses or whatever, uh, weapons of mass destruction? And she says, a lot of times that's the only work that's available, or it's the only work where people are really concerned about results. And so you start to feel like, that's everything. Well, you got to be careful about that, because what, you have one life to live. And so if the organization you're in is kind of a dead man walking, you got to look at the possibility of, a breakaway, or starting your own company, or your own approach, or something on the side, or some kind of a side gig or something, or early retirement or whatever. You have to be careful with those settings. Um, uh, you know, that wasn't the question. I think a scientist, in the lab, should be praying and loving and asking God for enlightenment about what they're doing. And at a meta level, asking God for enlightenment about whether this is something they should be doing at all, or whether some other purpose is out there for them. We all should be asking those kind of questions, I suppose. I mean, not all, but it's a thing. Um, as I say in the book, I think, that what theology has discovered is that, science has discovered a cosmic liturgy, and it's in these complex systems, and they're unfolding in their cycles of death and life. And I think that, what science has discovered about religion is that it is an emergent system. It's a system that uniquely in the universe promises that emergence is not reversible, that your soul and your life will last forever in heaven. And so it's a scientific interest for that. And it's their interest, there should be a scientific interest as organizations. And it's clear to me too, one thing I try to teach my students when I teach them about the three kinds of science, and I don't do that much anymore as dean, but I had a course related to that. The more sinful people become, the more religions are problems in simplicity, are problems in statistics merely, and they're not problems in organic complexity, right? The more we're controlled by the passions, the more Marx looks correct, or Freud looks correct. Our religious practice is just a neurosis. So really, the path of repentance, or the path of recovery from trauma, is a path from being someone who is reducible to a problem in simplicity, or a problem in statistics and simplicity, to someone who is an organically complex organism, alive, and even meta alive. I didn't answer the question well, but can we take the next one? I don't have a good answer.
No, it's good. It's good. You were the things you said were helpful, and not unrelated. um, uh, so I guess as a segue, I actually skipped a question, but it makes more sense now. And I think you do touch on this again, but I don't know if you again want to say more. Is there a role, and if so, what is it, for Western style therapy in the healing of souls?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about in that chapter. And, there's so many different kinds of therapy now. Therapy has evolved within itself. It has, um, there are schools and competing visions, and, it has to do what it's going to do. I don't want to comment on it more. I mean, to an extent, I'm just saying let the dead bury their own dead. To an extent, I'm just saying let the specialists in that field figure it out. If they read that chapter and they feel that, for example, this discussion of healthy shame, I mean, it's so freaking obvious in the whole history of the human race that this is synonymous with soul health, and we can only talk about shame as something negative. I mean, we're like robots. So if that's something that pricks them and they can adjust their whatever, then fine. Um, but look, um, you know, we have therapists on staff at our college, and students turn to them all the time. And what they find is an older mentor. They find someone with life experience. They find someone who's willing to listen for an hour at a time, week after week. They find someone who has a structured way of helping the student discover their own strengths and come to come gently to a self-awareness. Um, what's wrong with any of that? That's all fantastic. Um, but our students also, are like, slavishly in the chapel. I mean, we have 2 services a day, and it's packed with the students, and the faculty are often too busy to make it, but the students never seem to be. So they have a beauty first context within which to pursue a limited analysis of the self. Look, my own ethics class, what is it in the end, right? Like I say, it is something. It is a training. It is a vision. It is something. But it'd be best, having learned it at the end of the semester, if they just put it to one side and get out there and pursue Christ with all that they are. Oh, and learn that for themselves. So I think there's something true of that in therapy as well. It's for a season, and it shouldn't be intruding into every friendship or every dinner party conversation and talking about your this or that or whatever. Like, come on, have some class, some shame, some sense of self-respect about what is appropriate to say about yourself when. And if you don't cultivate that basic class, you're a burden on people around you. It's just tough. Now, I know you may be wounded and you can't, so I don't care. Go ahead, let her rip. But that's not healthy. That's not health. That's a stage. It may last your whole life until your dying breath, and no one cares. It's fine. It's like Shea says, can trauma be healed? And then he just says yes, no, maybe. He just gives the argument for each, just leaves it. And it's the same with all of us, right? I don't subscribe to the Oprah Winfrey vision of the world, which is that, everyone is supposed to be smooth. Lots of people who seem psychologically, off turn out to be very holy people. And I don't mean that they're not psychologically off. They are, but they're also very holy. So that's not the only category or the ultimate category. There's a lot more, and there's grace in people's lives, and people suffer, and there just doesn't seem to be any healing for it. But somehow, it's like Solzhenitsyn's story. They hold society together. So
Yeah,
you just can't take that too far, I think.
yeah,
Right? We really are, as Americans, we are looking to mass produce the healthy soul like a McDonald's hamburger by the billions. We just want to churn them out. And if there's not healthy, then there's something went wrong in the system, or the therapist was incompetent, or the person was non-compliant, or whatever. Hey, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Good. This is a question that's related to the book. It came from one of our group members, which you might find interesting. You may have nothing to say. Do you have any thoughts on AI and the implications for both anthropology as well as for society?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So much of the history of economic life has been a history of domestication and of bending things to be human friendly. And Michael Pollan in The Omnivore's Dilemma has shown that they're doing it to us too. The tulips are domesticating us, and there's and certainly the somehow there's a human fungi alliance, that penicillin is really our friend and all that. So um, it's hard to sort that out. It's hard to sort that out. In the near term, you can say that AI will be a challenge to you to become more human, to become more alive in Christ, to transcend what is merely mechanically reproducible, right? Like, is your personality really, however, as AI grows, eventually that standard will fall. It'll be hard to know. So it really is it really is a terrible, potentially terrible threat. Um, the other rule from economics is that in general, the more the capital in an economy grows, the higher wages grow in that economy, right? And this is not what people tend to assume. They tend to assume that more machines means workers are out of business. And of course, economically, on the whole, that's the opposite of what happens. So a smarter AI will tend to make people more valuable. I don't know how yet, but that's what will be the overall. Right? Peter Thiel writes about this in his book 0 to 1 a little bit, and he talks about his Palantir company, which is an AI itself, and um, basically never tries to divorce it from the human analyst. I think intelligence is such an interesting thing, right? Like, we've had this brief moment where a certain kind of IQ has been ascendant, and that may pass with AI, and we may come to a thing where only the jazz musician can understand these AI systems at their highest complexity, or only the crafts person or the homemaker. There's a lot of different ways to be stupid and smart, and school tends to select for 10% of them, and give everyone else a permanent inferiority complex and low self-esteem. So um so something like that could also be interesting. It could bring out, I'd like to say I'm terrified, but what's to be done anyway? It's like no one's in charge in a democracy. No one seems to be thinking about these things. It's booming along, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Was there a second part of that question beside the AI thing?
I don't think so. I think that was the gist of it. Um, uh, there was a connection at the end of the question, which I didn't read, about. I'll read it. So I heard an insightful person talking about how in the New Jerusalem the tree of life was in the center, and nature had its proper place with human technology on the periphery. But before
Oh,
we get to the New Jerusalem, the earth will become pretty wretched, and perhaps AI could be compared to the beast that makes an image of itself so everyone worships it.
my God, yeah, that's possible. I mean, look what just happened, with Twitter, and I don't know if you're following like the Twitter files and everything.
Yeah,
That Twitter went from this arena of free expression, and I my philosophy on Twitter is if somebody says one interesting thing, just one clever thing, I hit follow for life. I don't know how many people I'm following, 10,000 or something. Um, and you know, trying to suss out. I mean, I can't find it in a way, but Black Twitter, like I want to hear those voices. Those are not voices I hear. So Twitter went from this incredible thing where you might, you know, to somehow the FBI and a dozen other federal agencies were paying Twitter to suppress information. And everyone pretended that that wasn't happening. Our elites, are stuck on that. And I don't know what to do about that. It's just, my point is that these systems the more powerful our systems become, the more easily they can turn toxic. And that's true of, the Industrial Revolution itself. And Jane Jacobs' last book that she completed was called Dark Age Ahead. And of course, I read that from my perspective as an Orthodox theologian. By that time, she and I were friends, you know. And what she's describing is a world in which more and more institutions become these zombies, lumbering along, no longer fulfilling their original purpose, only existing to survive and for the people in them to, keep their paycheck or their power or whatever. And um, that's always a possibility of any organization. Can happen. I think, I don't think it happens in parishes because the miracle of the liturgy is something beyond that. Um, anyway, but I suppose people think it does or whatever to some extent. But that's so. What she was trying to say is so. What she was saying is that the reason this predominance of zombie organizations like a Roman Catholic Church that can't protect children, like an FBI that's suppressing free speech against the sitting president. All these zombie organizations piling up. Um, like corporations, that pushing for war with Russia, because they're manufacturing this, or war with China, or whatever. She said the reason that spells a dark age is because within these organizations, people lose their personhood. And a dark age is when a culture is lost. And a culture can only be transmitted from one person to another person. So as we go along with these systems and we just repeat the lie that we're told to keep our job or to keep our situation, we're betraying our personhood. And now we can no longer convey culture. We have to just be careful that, I don't know how, we have to pray, repentantly about that, so that we, this. And I'm not. I hope I don't sound like just like I'm against the left wing or something, or the right wing, and it's a human thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think both left and right have been co-opted by the machine or something else.
And not just the machine, but a sleek machine. So there is a kind of beauty firstness there. Like they want a machine that looks very, very, very all the gears are hidden. Just press a button. So it's godlike power that people have. And they cannot speak meaningfully with the rough-hewn person. The amateur scholar is no longer gets a voice. The you know one bad tweet, and you're banished. Now this is that's a kind of vanity. It's a sort of it's the perversion of beauty.
Yeah.
Like whatever. Just look, I mean, when I'm on Black Twitter, the joy of that is to hear people crying out against me, against white people. I mean, it's like, let them say bad things. Let me hear this for my salvation, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I have the sense that that's the voice of people. It's not like a voice of, let's say, a protected class, a professoriate class trying to impose something on me. Just a brother in Christ telling me I'm sick of white people. Let's hear it.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain the difference? And if it's not clear, then we'll have this is from Father Jacob, who should still be with us. He can clarify. Can you explain the difference between a more abstract sense of the forms and your understanding of them?
Uh,
These forms, archetypal patterns, seem to be more than ideas. Maybe this is because they are divine ideas and not human ideas, that is, mere concepts. Maybe divine ideas, forms slash archetypes are already somehow created as themselves from the beginning and fall from that original nature, question mark. Is this a uniquely Orthodox interpretation of Plato? Is it patristic?
yeah, that's really a good question. That's hard. Um, I was kind of had an enthusiasm when I wrote that part. I think, I mean, the question that concerned me in chapter 6 was, did God have to create? And that's supposed to be, the Neoplatonic view versus the Christian view that it was a matter of arbitrariness. And I was trying to somehow unify those opposites and say that really we do that paradox of a wild thing that's has to be just that way. That coinciding of opposites is something that is the hallmark of life. So that was the larger context, for that. And that's important to me um, because Christopher Alexander is so important for me. The timeless way of building. It just seems it's not a book I read a lot, and I don't go back to it in that way. But um, it was so liberating to first read that, and so liberating to see that vision of that coinciding of relaxedness and order, or of wildness and order. Um I mentioned this in another interview recently. I sometimes, if you use Waze, the Waze traffic app at rush hour, it'll just shove you onto roads that you've never seen, even though they're just half a mile from your house. And some of these roads just have that naturalness, that softness, that like nothing is built to those specs anymore. So, um, so anyway, that whole Alexander vision and trying to see how, apply that to creation, the creation. As far as the forms, look, I think that they can create these things like with computer simulations, like they'll do these, jumbled parts that are somehow like bumping into each other, and like there's some rules of interaction, and they're randomly colliding and connecting randomly, and they form, wheels or circles, or you've all seen like, these microscopic photographs of a microscopic gear in some, I don't know what it is, a virus or all kinds of crazy mechanical things are in nature. And why do these same shapes keep repeating? Why are they so fundamental? And so something like the forms. And then I also suggest that even if we don't subscribe to the Platonic view of the forms, we do subscribe to a semi-Platonic view of the forms in the concept of scientific law. It's so immutable and eternal. I mean, those laws are as old as creation. I mean, that's what we're speculating at any rate. And these laws have this mathematical precision. So there's certainly something to that vision of the forms. And then I was trying to say there that somehow, the forms aren't eternal, whatever. I don't know. They're just sort of this mix because it had, um, it's the self-emptying of the logos into, beyond, outside God's self, whatever that means. The self-emptying is overflowing. And so somehow the forms are all they're modes. They're modes within Christ, of within the logos, of you know ways that he allows in his mercy things to exist. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's a tough topic, and it's a controversy for centuries. That's why I say, I mean, I'm not going to clear it up. I don't think the fathers really talk about the forms though that much. I think they just leave that aside. Um, I revived it because I thought that the patterns, um, in the patterns of, I mean, the patterns that Christopher Alexander describes in the timeless way of building are so important to understand, and that these have this perennial strength. Andrew Gold has this really beautiful article. I don't know if it's in Road to Emmaus or if it's on his Orthodox Arch Journal website or where it is. And he tries to find like the meta form of the Orthodox Church. Like he's like, clearly, okay, this is what a Greek Orthodox Church is. This is a Russian Orthodox, a Georgian Orthodox Church. But what do they all for sure have in common? And he lays it out. He captures what that is. And um, there's just something so beautiful and profound about that level of insight about fundamental principles.
Yeah, great. Well, Father Marcus, are there some questions in the comments
I
that
mean, there was one question early on, and perhaps Dr. Patitsas could comment on. It's a very practical question. What might you say to someone um, who has a friend who is either close to suicide, or perhaps even as you've experienced someone who else has had suicide, in terms of beauty as therapy?
Gosh, I mean, we went through this. I don't know if some of you were part of this. As an Orthodox community, there was a young, I guess, either a catechumen or newly Orthodox convert a couple of weeks ago who, you know, was just saying very openly on Facebook and Twitter or wherever he was that he was, and then he did take his own life. It was just a very hard thing to go through. I never met him. It's a young kid. I can't remember his name, but I mean, I think we have as a society protocols around this, right? And I think that those protocols are fairly tried and true of trying to protect the person immediately if possible, if necessary, a 72-hour observation. So in those kind of situations, I think those protocols are the thing to do. I mean, if I were Elder Porphyrios, maybe I'd have a different answer or something, but I'm sure that if I were Elder Porphyrios, that answer would be quite specific to an individual person. It wouldn't be something that advice I could give, right? More generally, life can be hard and life can be isolating, and there's a limit to what a person can take. And when we see that they're at their limit, we either need to increase the support or we need to increase, decrease the burden, or increase their internal strength. I mean, something has to change, right? So much of the church is teaching a way of nonviolence, because all of her ethos is so gentle and it's so mild, and there's so much in the services of the church, the experience of the worship of the church, that can take us out of this realm of hatred, including self-hatred, or judgment, including self-judgment. So I think the church on the whole, Orthodox civilizations on the whole, tend to have lower rates of suicide, but genetic factors. I mean, you think about, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about what Russia was like before 1917, you know, but or before 1914, whatever. But it's helpful if people can bring themselves to the church, and if, you know, if we can. I don't have a good answer, you know, but certainly so many people, when they've come in the presence of a saint or an elder or an abbess, have just felt a relief that they can't find anywhere else. And so I certainly pray that there are more people, God sends more people like this. And I think any harshness in us that we bear, that we cultivate within ourselves, harshness towards the right, harshness towards Trump, harshness towards Biden, harshness, I think these things are the trick of the enemy. And, you know, I studied political science in college, and I used to be more interested in politics, but that harshness is a killer, and it accumulates. My harshness, my hard-heartedness towards the person I'm disappointed in, yours towards yours, it accumulates in a society, and we want to start to defuse that and train, disciple others to defuse that, to actively pray for their enemies, actively pray for the people they're disappointed in, actively understand, you know, what they might be doing, so that as individuals, as a church, we are a refuge from this kind of civil war mentality that, you know, we seem to be a little bit in nowadays. Well, I guess it's not just, yeah, I think that's right. you know when after the election in 2020, I mean, some friends and I, we just said, this is not going to end well. So, and I mean, in November of 2020. So we started doing an akathist together every day, you know, by phone. So when January 6th came, you know, and I saw that vision of, I mean, just the hundreds or whatever, thousands of people outside the Capitol, my heart sank, but I was prepared because I had prepared myself for 2 months. I knew that was coming. I knew something like that was coming. So I just called those two friends and we did an akathist. And when we finished the akathist, came back to CNN, and, you know, the party was over. The crowd had been dispersed. So I think, you know, we can't be naive about anything, and this society is what it is, and there's lots of malevolent actors and all that, but certainly we can't be naive about our own contributions to that, and then to take the next step, our own responsibility to actually fix it. And I think, you know, everyone's different, but certainly through prayer. Anyway, enough of me. I've said enough. Anything else? I feel like I'm just talking too much. Sorry.
Well, thank you for talking. That's what we wanted. That's what we were hoping you would do. So you've done a good job. You've done the job that we asked you to do.
Have you finished The Ethics of Beauty as a book? Is it done now?
You know, remarkably, I set up this evening not really thinking about. I just kind of I was like, well, we usually meet on Thursday evenings or whatever. It ended up when I didn't plan it this way, but we've been meeting every 2 weeks, every second Thursday, and it was 2 weeks ago tonight that we finished the book. So it's like perfect. Yeah. So we are
Good.
finished.
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Now you must forget it. I must forget all about it. And go to confession and just, it was all a dream. It was all a vision of the forms, but now you're back to reality. And